think that that's a very commendable thing. Because as Barry points out in the book itself, it wasn't until 1984, I came to the church in 1989, that women were first allowed to become deacons. But yet, they could be sent out to far-flung places to go and do God's work, but not considered good enough to be deacons within the chapel. And thank God times have changed, and of course, that's no longer an issue. Amen. Thank you very much. But really, like I said, we must, first of all, one of the things I want to do is to actually mention some of the amazing women that are mentioned in this book. First of all, there's Anne and Kathleen Sober. This is an aunt and her niece, and they went all the way to Peru. And if you do have time, read the story of their journey through the Andes, and it took them over 3 weeks just to go through with camels through mountains. And when I say dangerous terrains, absolutely dangerous terrains, not something that you recommend to anyone to do. But these women and men voluntarily agreed to go on these journeys. There are others that also I will recommend to you. Margaret Brown, for example, who went to the Congo. And on her first journey there by flight, first time anyone tried to take a flight, the plane crashed and she died. Exactly. So people who have given selflessly. And there is one, even if you don't read anything else, please read the story of Joan Walks, who was leaving China because of the Boxer Revolution and the communists had taken over. It was no longer safe for missionaries, so she had to go to Hong Kong. And her journey from China to Hong Kong, which is not that far away, started on the 23rd of January and ended on the 26th of April, 1951. Over 3 months, because of the terrain and the difficulties and having to hide away from people that were trying to arrest them because they were considered agents of the West. While this might be a book that talks about missionaries, it also has an intellectual aspect to it, which I'll comment to you. Barry has mentioned here about the from to and the to from, and basically what that means is that this was a sending church. Now it is a receiving church in the sense that missionaries are now coming from the other parts of the world to come and meet with us here. And that's the changing face of mission work. And like I was mentioning to Patrick and Raquel, who are, of course, missionaries from here, who are now working with LCM, again, supported by this church. And that's the changing face of mission, as we see that the people that we went out to, or that people were sent out to go on mission to, are now the ones coming back into this part of the world to bring God's word to God's people, because the people that we're meeting out there are now basically on our doorsteps. And I don't want to have to go through the whole of the book, but really, there's a bit I need to comment to you. There's a letter from a former England manager, football manager, that is in this book. That even if you don't read anything else, read that letter, because I think it, it is very instructive as to why we do this. Yes, we did to the honor and glory of God, because that's what we're asked to do. Like we're reminded by the passage in Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all nations. And of course, the promise that God will be with us to the end. But that there's a reason why we need to continue to do mission work. And again, before I close, I again want to thank Barry for the work well done. I mean, this is your third book so far, and this indeed trumps the other two as well. So thank you very much. And again, please do not leave without having one of these books, because certainly will open your eyes to the fact that this church has done a lot. And also I want to commend the church, because again, Barry says about it. Financially, people struggle. It's in 1961, Barry was talking about the church facing a crisis of money. But people selflessly gave, actually keeping separate cards to make sure that they set aside monies for missionaries to go out. And you will have thought that in 2025 things will be different, but unfortunately we are just in the same situation where finances determine how much we can send out to those that are in the mission field. Well, a church that is faithful to that will always be rewarded, and I believe that that's why Ryland is able to say that, yes, we have sent out 81 people because we have been faithful. And I want to commend that to you as chair of the MSC. I'm always banging about money, but I also want to thank the church, the fact that we have been able to, from 1896 to 2025, that we've continued to do God's work. And as that passage in Matthew says, he will be with us to the very close of the age. So thank you very much for coming in this afternoon. And like I said, please do get a copy of this book before you leave. Thank you.
I'm not going to say very much till right at the end, but I've got some people who I made to read the draft of the book, and Richard's going to start off with that. Each person I gave a different sort of question, and Richard was asked to, why study history?
Well, hello, everybody. I was asked when I was sitting down there, have you read the book? I have a principle that when I'm asked to give a commendation, I won't do it unless I read it. Now, I don't think I read the glossary, I have to be honest. But I did read the book, and I will only give commendations when I've actually read the material. But my job really is just to begin to answer the question, does any of this matter? Does studying history matter in any way, shape, or form? Some of you may remember history at school. It is possible that it wasn't the most exciting subject that you recall. It is possible that you remember it was all about dates and monarchs and so on. And it's possible that even we as Christians might say, well, none of this really matters because the only thing that matters is the Bible. But there is a story. There's a story to be told from the times of the Bible right up to today. The story of doctrine and belief, the story of not just what happened, but why. How events and people have shaped our beliefs and actions today. The stories of our churches and denominations. I don't know how many denominations are represented here, but I imagine there's a Baptist or two around. And the First Baptist Church, founded in 1612. There's at least a good Anglican, but that's not me. I'm an Anglican, just not a very good one. So you're hearing from the good Anglican after me and me, and there may be others. But you know, we all have a story. And we all have a story that interlinks with what has happened between the time of Jesus and where we are today. And in addition to that, history teaches us about passion, the passion of individuals. Think of some great names, John Wesley, George Whitefield. Think of the whole missionary endeavor led by William Carey, Baptist. And an extraordinary individual. William Carey, known as the father of modern missions. And what an extraordinary individual he was, founding that college in which was open to both Christian and non-Christian, recognizing the importance of relating to that culture in which he was set. Bringing to life also, though, history, church history, the lives and the voices of countless ordinary Christians down the ages. Those people whose names are rarely known or not known at all, but who themselves have stories of the action of God in their hearts that are themselves both inspirational and transformational. So just a few brief points on why studying history is important and helps us today. Firstly, understanding our past deepens our knowledge of the faith. Understanding the past deepens our knowledge of the faith. And so it's not just about what happened, it's also about why things happened. Secondly, history inspires all of those great stories of the known and the unknown. The voices that are well recorded and the voices that are less well recorded. And I'll come back to that in a moment or two. History also gives context. And when I think of the really interesting things about the book we're talking about today is how it manages to place history in context. And so it's not just about the good things. It's about recognizing there are challenges along the way. And so, for example, as Chris will talk about after me, the relationship of the missionary enterprise to all of the complexities of empire can't be ignored, however long or big your missionary role is. It's a reality that has to be faced up to and addressed. And history also gives context. How one event relates to another. How the actions of an individual are placed in the context of a wider series of events. So, how should we go about it all then? And sometimes, you know, historians write grand narratives. I've had to read a lot of grand narratives about the history of the church. Normally, the grand narrative tells you more about the author than the history, because they've got the explanation for almost everything. And the biggest danger of the grand narrative is that it misses out the specific, the local, and the particular. It misses out the voices that are less heard. And that's where local history comes into play. Local history providing a particular narrative in a particular setting, in a particular place, dealing with what believers actually did and how believers actually behaved, how believers actually responded to the call of God to the mission field, how the church responded to the support of those missionaries. Forget the grand narratives. We need to know what people actually thought and did and how they acted. And so one of the most important aspects of the accurate understanding of the history of the church today is to allow all those voices to be heard, from the greatest to the least, or from the least to the greatest. And what I've realized in many, many years of teaching church history is how many people think they know exactly what all the great figures of the past thought. They know exactly what John Calvin thought, or they think they do. And so the basic message is to allow people to speak for themselves. Whether it's a name that is in all of the history books, your Calvins and your Luthers, or whether it's the individual members of this church, in this place, in this setting, down 250 years. And that's the beauty of God's journeying people. The book takes seriously the narrative of history, deals with the Protestant missionary movement, deals with the complexities of empire, but above all, it tries to bring out the names, the lives, and the passions of individual people whom God has called. I was particularly interested to read of Fred Shipway, and when I was sitting down there waiting, I was looking for him on the board, and there he is, Fred Shipway. Who's heard of Fred Shipway? No, probably not very many people. But even in the few pages that I read about Fred Shipway, although apparently there's a mistake on the date, even in the few pages I read about Fred Shipway and his calling to ministry in China and the way in which he responded to God's call on his life. What are the most extraordinary things? So, let me just encourage you to understand church history generally. Encourage you to be inspired by the story of God's action in the world over the last 2,000 years. But let me also encourage you to pay attention to the voices less heard, to pay attention to the individual Christian called by God possibly called by God in this place and from this place, and be inspired by them just as much as by the great names. So Barry, thank you for writing the book, the trilogy, I think Pastor Phil said. I was immediately thinking of, Lord of the Rings, probably about the same length if you put all of them together. I made the silly mistake over a cup of tea of asking Barry what was next. I think it might be another book. But anyway, thank you, and I'm going to hand over back to Barry now, who will introduce the next contributor.
Thanks, Richard, for that clarity. Richard flew back from the States yesterday, landing about midday yesterday, so he's still on US time, not UK time. I want to welcome Chris Sugden. Elaine and I were at medical school together. Well, not medical school, but pre-medical school. Chris has a rich history. He was one of the two people who founded the Oxford Centre for Mission Studies, and he's written in the past. He's a Rev as well, a canon doctor no less. I was thinking actually, when I see all the ministers who are here today, I think we need a Rev counter to I couldn't resist a bad joke. Chris, come and Chris has travelled from Oxford
Well, good evening, everybody. Barry's chapter 5 covers a wide field of literature on the nature of British colonialism and the relationship between the British Empire and mission. Now, it's important to keep those two issues separate. It's one thing to discuss the moral aspect of colonialism, as Professor, now Lord, Nigel Biggar does in his book, Colonialism, A Moral Reckoning, and the issues it raises, such as reparations, cultural appropriation, and imposition. And even those who were colonial subjects have varying views on this. One Indian scholar, Joshua Kalapati, has recently written in The Christian Contribution to Modern India, a survey of 75 people, both missionaries and nationals, who played a part, including Carey, Richard, who played a part in the shaping of modern India. And he's written, "To swallow the rhetoric that everything colonial is toxic is silly." He insists that scholars should distinguish between the benign British and the belligerent British. Now, my senior and long-time Indian colleague and friend, Canon Vinay Samuel, argues that in every historical era of empire, something positive can be found. The Roman occupation of Britain left roads built for the army of subjugation to use, which were good for hundreds of years, and perhaps someone drove down from Sheffield today on one of them, the A1. For him, the more fundamental issue is whether the Christian faith did anything to shape the conquest-seeking and resource-extracting nature of the makers of the British Empire. Did then any ethical line run through the British practice of empire that might distinguish it from other empires in history? Was it the imposition of law and order, the development of education and the subsequent democratization, which I'll refer to in a minute, and an accountable civil service. It's certainly clear that the British Empire made Christian mission physically and politically possible through control of the seas, communications, the suppression of slavery, and, for example, the suppression of widow burning in India by a Christian Indian Governor-General in 1829, and the promotion of education. To turn to the second question, the relationship between empire and mission, in India, which I know more about having served there with my wife, we must remember first that Christianity arrived in India in the 1st century after Christ with St. Thomas, long before it got here. The 19th century missionaries from the West mainly engaged there in education and medical work. The 164 Christian schools and colleges that they founded were facilitated by the empire, but, as Barry points out, were paid for in the main by mission bodies to educate an elite who would be a bridge with the masses. But at the same time, these schools and colleges played two other important roles. First, in his book, Joshua Kalapati notes that they, quote, shaped the minds of countless Hindus who were at the forefront of the Indian independence movement. Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, went to a Christian school in India and then on to Harrow and Trinity College, Cambridge. Secondly, Professor Robert Woodbury, now of Baylor University in Texas, convincingly demonstrates in an article published in 2012 and entitled The Missionary Roots of Liberal Democracy, that Protestants, who believed that people needed to read the Word of God, heavily influenced the rise and spread of democracies around the world. And the process was straightforward. Protestant Christians believe that to know God, people need to know his word. For that, they need to be able to read for themselves. Now, many religions have sacred writings, but these are mainly the preserve of the religious and political elites. So Protestants were heavily invested in education for everyone, including women and the poor. And they used printed materials to try and convert people. Once people can read, they can have access to other writing and information than that which the powerful in their society wanted them to read. And this therefore forced other groups to use printed materials to compete for ordinary people's attention. So, newspapers developed. Newspapers enabled a variety of political views to develop, and this enabled the rise of political parties. Now I come back to Joshua Kalapati, who, like Barry, focuses on the work of individual missionaries. He notes that missionaries worked to address what they saw as social evils, the effect on untouchables of the caste system, which discriminated against them and held them down in menial jobs, and the seclusion of women in a patriarchal society where many boys were brought up as spoiled despots. Hindu men compensated for centuries of lost power under the Muslims by tyrannizing their families, and the Hindu extended family could not survive without women slaving in it. Many missionaries were also linguists, learning and producing dictionaries of many Indian languages. And as India progressed to nationhood, they advocated the rights of all minorities rather than having separate electorates for Christians and other minorities, which of course meant that no Christian or minority member then could ever become a senior political figure because they were restricted to their own communities. No, the Christians urged that there should be no separate electorates because they wanted to urge a strong identification with the national culture. Tribal communities outside the caste system were also empowered, and Anglo-Indians, the children of Westerners and Indians, were urged to find their place as nationals of India. Now, in response to all that, the masses embraced Christianity. Why? Because it offered them dignity, education, and a livelihood. Read Barry's chapter for more.
Thank you, Chris. There's some deep stuff in the presentations this afternoon, and worth probably going back to online and trying to tease out some of that. And there's some important things, and thank you for bringing that to us, Chris. I had contact with someone, I'll mention the name in a little while, but brought me into contact with her husband. Hugh, an academic, an important perspective on the relationship between the African churches in the UK and evangelical, largely white evangelical churches. And Hugh has written his PhD on that subject and written a book on the subject, and brings a different perspective on all of that. So I'm very, very grateful, Hugh, to welcome you to the microphone, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. I came here to speak at a ministers' meeting, and after I'd spoken, I started talking to Barry. He was over there, and he said, "We've got an impressive missionary history here." And he started talking about the boards, and he said he'd like to show me them. And I said, "My wife would be really interested. She's the archivist at OMF." He said, "Oh, Marion." I thought, how does he know my wife? It was such a surprise. But he'd already been in touch with Marion about some of the CIM missionaries that are mentioned here. And Marion and I had the privilege of actually working quite closely with Barry on aspects of the book, trying to make it a little bit shorter, but every time we cut something out, Barry found something extra to put in. So it's been a kind of ever-expanding book, really. But I do want to pick up on what both Richard and Chris have said, in that there's something very special about this book, in the way that it roots into the locality and it picks up on individuals. And I so agree with Richard that sometimes the grand narrative just sweeps along and we don't get down to the reality and the nitty-gritty. One of the things that really speaks to me, and Barry asked me to pick up on the topic of what's getting called these days reverse mission. And the funny thing is that I've got certain reservations about that because I'm so concerned that we don't end up seeing reverse colonialism, where we come in with a superior attitude from overseas in the same way often we went in the other direction. But the extraordinary thing was that as I was just at the back thinking that the desserts looked rather good, my phone rang. And it actually was the academic who wrote the book on reverse mission. So I thought, you should be here instead of me, but I couldn't invite him in. But let me just say a couple of things which I think are really relevant. One of the things that spoke to me, I'd gone through the sort of world. I was looking at doing maxillofacial surgery, so I'd sort of gone off to do medicine and dentistry, ended up thinking I'd go into the Anglican ministry and tried to drop it all and go and do theology, and was advised at the time I was too young and too inexperienced, which was quite right. And they said, we've got too many people who've done theology and then gone straight into ministry. why don't you finish the dentistry? Well, that didn't appeal to me at all at that particular point. I really wanted to go into theology. But as I prayed, the Lord gave me this verse, which was, in whatever stage you're called, therein remain. I wished he'd said something different, but, I felt that was really what God was saying to me. So I finished that training, and then I thought, right, now, theological college. And I started praying, and I just knew that God was speaking to me from a certain verse which said, render to Caesar unto Caesar. And I kept reminding him that there was a second part to the verse. But he didn't seem to want me to go there. And I had to face the fact that I just had 6 years of training at government expense. And I was going to go off and do something else. And I really felt the Lord was saying, no, you've got to put back in to where you received. So that was our little world that we were in. And then I met Marion, who was working in one of the hospitals I was at. And we started looking at the possibility of solving my problems by thinking that we could render to God and Caesar at the same time if we went as medical missionaries. And I thought that would solve everything. And so we started looking in that direction. And we knew exactly where we were meant to be going. We knew the mission station in Zambia that we're being posted to. And we talked to our churches, and they were very happy to send us. I don't know quite why they were so enthusiastic, but you just have to read between the lines sometimes. And we were expecting to go out to Africa. And the thing that was drummed into us, because this was in the 70s, that you're going out to help. And that word got really drilled into me, that you're going to help. And they said, you're going to have to be careful, because Zambia's only just got its independence. The last thing they need is someone from the former colonial power coming to tell them how to do everything. So he said, you go to serve. You go not to be there as a sort of cross-cultural observer. You have to go and be prepared to immerse yourself in the culture to which you're going. So we were really excited about this. We were getting a vision for the mission field. And then right at the moment when we were about to go, we were told that the project we were going to had lost its funding from the government. And we were put on 4 years of wait to see if we could raise our funding. And at that particular point, we were confronted by a sort of senior missionary, Mike Griffiths, who really made this point, don't try and do anything overseas that you haven't done at home first. And there were we naively thinking that we'd be church planting and doing all of these exciting things on the mission field that we'd never done back at home. So we had to start rethinking and saying, what are we going to do? And I must admit, I was really disappointed about not going to Africa. And then someone came to me and said, I think God is saying something very particular to you. And I'm always a little bit dubious about these kind of personal prophecies, but they said, I don't think God wants you to go to Africa. He's going to send Africa to you. Well, of all the daft things back in the 1970s, that just seemed like a complete impossibility. It was like, how crazy is that? And then as the years went by, we did some church planting, and I put on a conference in London. And when I was putting on this conference, I'd done a lot of work with the Billy Graham organization, so I was a little bit known at this particular point. So we put on something at Wembley Conference Centre. And I was sort of bright enough to think that it would be good to have a pastor's lunch. What I didn't realize was that every delegate, when you're faced with a free lunch, decides to be a pastor. So I suddenly found that I'd got all of these people, and many of them had only recently arrived from Africa. Some had got medical backgrounds, some had got other backgrounds. But they'd really felt called to do something for God in this nation. And I was thinking, what do we do? So we had that pastor's lunch. And then they said to me, could we do this every couple of months? Could we just meet? Could you just help us understand where we've come to and what we can contribute? And that was a huge, huge privilege. I was working quite closely with the Evangelical Alliance at the time, and we were looking at all sorts of things that we were writing on from a sort of more academic perspective. And they said, we really do need to understand what is going on. What is God doing? Some of you will know that as we approach the millennium, the governments in the world came up with certain millennial development goals. What is less known is that the church came up with some millennium development goals as well. One of which was that there should be a culturally relevant church within everyone's reach worldwide. that really struck me. We'd been out to the Emirates lots of times. There's a Filipino church. There's an Indian church. There's a Bengali church. There's a Pakistani church. There's no Emirati church. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized how difficult it would be for an Emirati to actually go to a Filipino church. How difficult it would be to cross some of those barriers. And I thought, God, how are you going to put a culturally relevant church in everyone's reach worldwide? And I just heard the Lord say, I'm doing it. And I'd already had conversations with the Ugandan government who were saying to me, what are we doing about all these churches that are springing up? And I thought, Lord, surely that all these churches springing up are not your way of actually putting a culturally relevant church in everyone's reach worldwide. And I just felt the Lord was saying, yes, that's what I'm doing. And I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Do I domesticate it? Sort of bring it under some. Do I regulate it? Do I educate it? All of those seem really good. And all the Lord said was facilitate it. And it has been incredible what God has been doing. And when I read Barry's book, and I got to the bit about how this church that had been such a powerful sending church had now become an incredible receiving church. How when you had a multicultural meal here, you've got so many different recipes presented. And I realized that this is something that God is doing at this time. Some of our greatest sending nations are the ones that we were originally sending to. There's a kind of turning things upside down. I've just been reading C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, and one of the things he said in it is we have an iconoclastic God. Every time we build an image of what we think should be, he comes along and smashes it down. He said the incarnation was the greatest iconoclastic act because everyone knew what the Messiah was going to be like, and when he came, he was completely different from what everyone expected. And we're living at a time when God is doing some extraordinary things. When churches that felt that they were going to be monocultural churches forever are becoming ethnically diverse. And the interesting thing about that is that that is making churches more relevant in our increasingly ethnically diverse communities. I still think there's a tremendous place for monocultural churches because I know that actually there can be swift growth. I was working with the Durham University project on church growth, and we were observing that actually we're now seeing church growth in every one of our major cities. It's different in the rural environment. People are coming in from the rural environment into the cities. But in every city, we're seeing growth. And some of that is because of not just immigration growth, but how effective people from immigrant backgrounds are at reaching out to other people of the same culture. We're seeing youth churches. The latest report from the Bible Society is staggering. But I've been knowing that this is happening. And so we've got this incredible diversity at the moment. And one of the reasons why you need to read Barry's book, and I know it's written and it'll work in the academic world because of its rootedness into a situation, but it'll definitely work for here. And those of you who are from this church or from this area and want to get the sense of what God is doing, then do read the book, because I do think that incredible transition from being one of the most effective sending churches in the area to becoming one of the most effective receiving churches in the area is something that is really significant at this time. So you're right on the cutting edge, Rylane, and thank you, Barry, for explaining that to everybody.
Thank you, Hugh. Anne, is Anne? Oh, sorry, Anne. I didn't see you come in, and I was beginning to think, is Anne there? Anne Luther is a pastor at Peckham Park Baptist Church, a very dear friend to us at Rylane, incredibly hard worker, and Anne, thank you for taking the time to read the book, the draft of the book, and providing a commendation.
Good evening. So, Barry's book. I understand the fourth one's going to be War Heroes. But don't tell anyone. When we look at the Bible, it's full of stories about God active among real people, living real lives in real places, and being willing to follow God's leading. It's about individuals who do that. And Barry's book is also about many individuals living around here or wherever, real lives, real places. And missionaries are about just these ordinary people who do extraordinary things and go to extraordinary places. Now, I was late. I was a late arrival, Barry, you're absolutely right. But I did manage to get a chocolate eclair. I was late this evening because I was getting ready at home to receive 4 visitors who have come to stay for a week in our house. And these 4 have a relevance to this evening. Some of you know them. Their names are Jonathan, Kayla, Natalia and Grace. It's a pastor and his family from Honduras. And they didn't come as missionaries. They came because they had to come. They came because Pastor Jonathan received death threats because he was teaching his young people about standing against the cartels in Honduras. And so the family were threatened and they came over. And they came over as asylum seekers. And Kayla and the children were living down the road in the Best Western Hotel, while Jonathan was over at Wembley in Holiday Inn as an asylum seeker. And the day I met them, it was a Christmas day. It was a memorable day, a memorable Christmas day, because I'd been invited to be a guest at a Christmas dinner in our own church, just up the road in Peckham. So I was going to be a guest there, and I met a number of people. It was there were Christians there, there were non-Christians there. I don't think any of them were from the UK, and they were all asylum seekers that a missionary lady in our church, Rubid, had gathered together. And so we had this Christmas dinner in our church where I was a guest with very limited Spanish. And so I don't think I've ever been treated so well and with such hospitality from the other guests in the Christmas dinner in our church. And I met Jonathan and Keela, and they hadn't chosen to be missionaries, but they were sent. And having come here, they chose to live their lives in such a way as to be kingdom people. And now they live in Portsmouth, and they're being kingdom people in Portsmouth, attending their local church, being active in their local church, very active. Kids go to the local schools. And they're being missionaries. Not their choice, but their choice to be able to, despite the difficulties and challenge of being asylum seekers, choosing to minister kingdom business in the way they live. And as I reflected later on that Christmas dinner, and I remembered something that Pat Took, Reverend Dr. Pat Took, who was a LBA Baptist leader, she once said that if we're going to be effective in these days of reverse mission, whatever we see that as, then we must learn to be able to be both hosts and guests, and sometimes at similar times. We must learn that we have to receive, be able to receive, as well as give. That we have to be able to listen, as well as talk. That we have to be able to, someone used the phrase, one of the speakers used the phrase, immerse ourselves in culture. That means sitting next to each other at a meal and not necessarily speaking to one another, speaking down from one another from a higher place. We have to learn to be both host and guest, to learn to both give and receive. Because actually effective ministry, I think in these days, has a lot to do with hospitality. A lot to do with the whole thing of hospitality. My favourite image of God is as a host. God is the ultimate host. And Jesus, at times, was the host, but he also knew how to be guest. If we come through Lent, we've got that beautiful story of him being a guest in Lazarus' house and Mary anointing his feet. That beautiful picture of worship. And as Jesus was able to be both host and guest. And then a week later, he washed his disciples' feet as the host. If we're going to be effective, both individuals and churches, then we need to learn both and to be able to carry both out in the as a reflection of God. And Barry, in your book, you brought so many thoughts and ideas. You've mentioned so many amazing people who should inspire us. And I think I can't remember the question you asked, but something about, should we remember? Well, on the second Sunday of every year, as a nation, we remember those who have gone before and those who died for our freedom. Why shouldn't we remember those who have gone before us in the kingdom and sacrificed themselves for the benefit of the kingdom and the blessing of the gospel? So, read the book before he brings out the next one.
Thank you, Anne. We're more or less on time, and we've got two ways to... we've probably got about another quarter an hour to present to you, largely around the building and linking. All the proceeds from the sale of the book are going to the building fund. If you're able to give more than the £10 we're recommending, that's lovely, and it will go into the building fund. We can have, and we put on the program, a 10-minute break to finish little bits of food, have another quick drink of a cold drink, or we can go ploughing on and use that 10 minutes at the end. Can I just do a straw poll of which you'd prefer to do? Would you prefer to just keep on? Okay, that's... I'm going to hand over to Simona in just a minute, but thank you to those who presented. I'm really, really grateful. There's a lot of depth in what has been said, and I'm very, very grateful. Well worth looking again on the YouTube channel and thinking about some of those things. Thank you, Raquel and Sophie and Winston and all the other people involved in your team, Raquel, who have just put on a lovely, lovely display of food that is now sitting in our stomachs rather than on a nice display. So thank you very, very much indeed. Simona, where are you? Yeah, we're going to watch a video, and then Simona's going to talk to us, and then we're going to watch another video. So the first video is about 4 minutes, and we're going to show that hopefully now.
My name is Michael, and I'm part of the Southwark team, and I'm working closely with Rye Lane Chapel in Peckham. And my vision is to see people come to the kingdom. The church will start to fill, and that's what we're seeing here.
I feel quite nervous and fearful about just going up to someone on the street. But once Michael started taking me out to do door knocking, I began to lose that fear. And one wonderful day, we knocked on the door of Ruby.
I love talking to people, so it was really nice talking to Michael and Winston.
We were just asking her questions about Peckham, what she likes about Peckham, and then I think we went on to the subject, do you have any spiritual beliefs?
I just shared about what I believed in at that moment. I was always quite spiritual as a child. I did think Jesus was real. I just didn't know whether the Bible was real.
We carried on talking, and we invited her to church.
So I called up my friend Georgina and I said, I've got this church and it's only around the corner. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I need some peace. Let me try it there. It was quite overwhelming at first. It's amazing, you get this overwhelmed experience.
Something about that worship team, man, and just praising the Lord, like all of this passion that everyone has, like how do I get there? What do I do?
There was a WhatsApp message from Winston. Ruby has come to church and she's brought Georgina with her. I saw them. I was overjoyed. And then the following week, he sends me another message. He said, Pastor Phil has been preaching, he did an altar call, and he said, Ruby and Georgina went up to the front and become born again. He said, I was there, I saw it.
It just hit, something clicked in my head, something clicked in my heart, and it was like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
I came up and they prayed for me and I gave my life to Jesus. From that day, everyone noticed that I was just happy all the time, and like they were like, what's going on like with Ruby?
I felt like my whole life built up to that moment.
I started to well up and I was just thinking, Lord, look at this. I'm in awe of what the Lord had done. And that's how the story started. But the story does continue.
My dad moved away when I was younger. When I got into my teenage years, I just kind of started, I don't know, like resenting him. I remember going to church, obviously with Rubes, and starting to go consistently. And then at that point, I prayed to God and I was like, God, take the broken things in my life and fix it. I remember writing that, or something along those lines, in my dad's birthday card.
She sent me a birthday card and she said that she prayed to God that me and her can get back together.
He opened the birthday card and he just looked at me and he just held me and just started crying. And then I guess from there, like the healing kind of took place.
This is the time for me to step up as a father. And I remember weeks after that, I chose myself to get baptized. When I got baptized, I came up, it was like a weight just lifted. And it was a very emotional time for me. As a father, I feel so great that she's found the Lord.
Dad started coming to church, then Brandon started going to church.
And I heard that Georgie was also going to church, and that she's been saved, and she's been born again, and she's been baptized. And then I heard that my dad was also going to church and was going to be changing his life. I remember literally after hearing that, I literally came to Rye Lane Church, sat right in the back row. It was a rocky season during that time. There was a lot of things that were kind of going wrong. Pastor Phil was up on the stage because I was very much convicted in myself. And then I broke down to tears on that day as well. I broke down into tears. Put your hands up if you want to be saved, and the rest is history.
I was watching the rerun on YouTube, and I'm looking down and I thought, I know those locks. And next minute I'm watching, I saw Brandon get up, tears just might need a tissue. For a dad, a father, to see his children in front of the biggest father he can ever get, Jesus Christ. I remember that day to the end of my days. Glorious day, fantastic day.
And then Brandon started coming and he brought his girlfriend.
When I came here, I just felt a level of peace. That's when I said I need to die to my old self to be born again in Christ.
And at least I had the weight of the world lifted off our shoulders.
I don't believe in coincidences, and I never really have. So the fact that all of this is happening, I'm feeling the Holy Spirit through me, and I'm seeing it translate through the family as well. Do you know what I mean? Someone's knocking on Ruby's door. We're all now under the same roof in the same church.
God uses me to reach people with the gospel. He uses the church to reach the people with the gospel. This is the fruits of it. It just shows the power of God unto salvation. It's the Great Commission, isn't it? Go into all the world, not sit in your church, go into all the world and preach the gospel. And that's what we want to equip the church to do.
Good evening, everyone. As we just saw on the video, I would like to read again Luke 14:23, where he says, "Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full." This verse speaks of an open invitation, an urgent call to welcome everyone in. As we already mentioned tonight, and it was beautiful, we are now a receiving church. And today, I want to invite you to think not just about the call, but where people are being invited into. In the book that Barry wonderfully wrote, we can read powerful stories from the missionaries, people on the move, living lightly, bringing the gospel wherever they go. Yet even missionaries know the value of a home, a place of welcome, a place of peace, a place where someone puts the kettle on or makes you a plate of pasta if you come to mine, a place where you can sit and rest and feel like you belong. Here in Peckham, at Rye Lane, we want to be that house. Not just a building with bricks, a new boiler, new chairs, a new floor, but a house filled with people. A house that serves our community physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And as we continue to send people out in the world, we also want to be ready to welcome people in, to be a place that transforms lives, one person at a time. But to do that, we need a building that can hold this vision, a house that can be full. So imagine a house for our youth who face challenges daily in our society, a place where they can feel safe, play freely, learn music in a dedicated room for them, or get support for their homework. A house for the elderly, with the facilities that they need. Fragile in body, yes, but rich in wisdom and experience. A house for those struggling with mental health, where they can rest their bodies and their minds during our Friday morning outreach, welcoming a space designed to help them feel seen and heard. A house for the refugees who long for the comfort of a home they had to leave behind. A place where they can cook their meals, share their stories, and begin to feel at home again. And above all, a house full of worshipers, lifting up the name of Jesus, growing in faith, and going back out into the world to invite others in so that his house can be full. So this is more than a building project. This is a mission project that involves a building. And that's why we need your help. We are raising funds to redevelop our house, our church building, not just for new walls or working electrics, but to build that kind of house that Luke 14 talks about, a house that can be full. You can help us through prayer, or you can help us by giving, however the Lord leads you. Around the room, you will find some QR codes where you can donate and stay updated on how your contribution is helping this vision come to life. One day, I want to say in faith, that we will all say together, Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building your temple of your glory name come from your hand, and all it belongs to you. So thank you for being here, thank you for your heart, and thank you for being part of this mission. And now we can watch a video, another one, where it gives a closer look of what this building project and this calling is all about.
I have been coming to Rye Lane Chapel for a long time, my whole life, and I love how it has always felt like a family. I've always felt welcome. I've always felt like I can be involved in serving and in worship and prayer, and it's been a blessing to attend.
The worship is amazing. I know that when I come to here, anytime I worship, my spirit is highly lifted up.
The YCM mi piace quando leggiamo la Bibbia.
I enjoy coming to Rye Lane because there's a diversity of people here and we can worship together.
Mo dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ Ọlọ́run tó mú wa wá sí ìjọ Rye Lane Baptist Church. Wọ́n fi hàn wá wípé lóòótọ́ Jésù ni ìfẹ́.
I like the food that they serve and it's very good.
Ludzie są bardzo mili i przyjaźni.
En Empowered a mí me gusta cuando hacemos preguntas y cómo nos enfocamos en la palabra de Dios.
For 2 centuries, Rye Lane Chapel has stood as a beacon of hope and faith, a place where generations have come to worship, celebrate life's milestones, and find strength in togetherness.
But preserving this heritage isn't just about maintaining the bricks. It's about honouring those who built it and ensuring it continues to inspire future generations.
This church is more than a building. It's a vibrant part of our community, a safe space for gathering, celebrating, and supporting one another.
But this building needs a refresh. We're seeking to bring this building into the 21st century, to enhance and preserve it for future generations.
By restoring this historic chapel, we can improve its beauty and functionality while keeping its character intact.
We envisage a place where everyone is welcome. By adding step-free entrances and facilities, we can make this church accessible to all.
We're committed to making this church environmentally friendly. By improving the heating system and installing solar panels, we can reduce our carbon footprint and ensure a sustainable future for our place of worship.
With your support, we can honour our past and build a brighter future.
Join us in this mission. Help us preserve the heritage, improve our community, and keep the spirit of this church alive for generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add my thanks to you all for coming? Family, friends, colleagues. In 2016, Pastor Frank, the previous minister here at Rye Lane, asked me to pull together a history of the chapel for its 200th anniversary in 2018, building on what had been previously written. History of the Sunday school followed, again lots of learning, reading, searching through the church's archive, obtaining information from people who had attended Sunday school here in the past. That was 2022. I wanted to find out more about our mission history. This board was up in the back hall, and Brenda had helpfully pulled together information on the more recent people down this little bit, but there were 64 other names on that board that I knew very little about. I wanted to find out about the mission history, how the church had supported people. What were the stories of the people on that board? So I got to work, mostly during the COVID years. And then about 9 months ago, I showed the draft to 2 people whose views I valued and asked them to read the draft. Both of them said the same thing. You've got the basis of something interesting, but it needs to be about half the length it is. So began a rather painful process of doing exactly that. I had over 200,000 words, and I needed, on Marion's insistence, to get below 100,000. Marion, you walked with me and edited, sometimes drastically, but the book is much better for your doing that. I would just want to say a very sincere thank you. It's somewhere there's a bunch of flowers that Simona is just bringing to you now. The other person who has spent so many hours doing the layout, trying to do things to improve the quality of the pictures. Thank you, Ruth, for your professionalism, for your work on the cover design, for your layout of all the book. Really grateful. In the centenary booklet in 1918, the following was written: "The Church has a noble record, but a noble record may be a curse if it's made the excuse for slackness today. It may be a blessing if it becomes an incentive and an inspiration to more consecrated service and greater faith." John Stott put it like this: "Is it possible for us to truly honor the past and live in the present simultaneously? Is it possible to truly honor the past but live in the present in a very different world?" We've heard some of that in terms of reverse mission. And that's where three guys from the London City Mission have been invaluable to us as a church, to bring our mission history into the present, to teach us to not only learn from the past, but to reach out today to a needy, hurting world. Mikey, Daniel, Doug, thank you. Stand up, my friends. I don't know if Daniel's here. There's Mikey and Doug are here. And please give our thanks to Daniel as well. My brother Trev, who's become a great-grandfather today, and he's told me that I'm a great-great-uncle now. Always at the end of the phone when I got into computer difficulties, and I frequently did that. Thank you, Trev, for all the support you've given me over not an easy time. Thank you to Sue, my sister who helped when I was grappling with the mission history of Yakusu in the Congo. Sue was there for pretty well 15 years in the 70s and 80s. My wife, Gwen, who not only assisted with editing but also encouraged me. It's been by far the hardest of the 3 books to write. There were times when I felt there were times when I felt like giving up. So having it as a family project with Gwen's support, with Trev and Sue's support, and the wider family as well. Those of you who know our family realize that since the first book was begun almost 9 years ago, these years have not been easy as we journeyed with our twin sons to the end of their earthly lives. Two of the 3 books are dedicated to them. Phil and Sheila were with us in September 22 for part of what proved to be Robbie's final hours, when Phil spoke aloud to the words, "I go to prepare a place for you." My journey of grief has not been easy, but I'm grateful that writing the books has provided both a focus and a challenge in those circumstances. So thank you for all who supported us in that journey. Lastly, thank you for the fellowship here. Pastor Phil and Rachel, and so many others. I can't mention you all, but I'm very, very grateful. You provided Gwen and me with a great deal of support, and thank you. Grateful for those who have toiled in the past, Pastor Frank especially, those who do so in the present, Pastor Phil, and those I work closely with here, Lily, Simona, Norma, Hakeem, Miguel, Winston, Sophie. And those who in the goodness of God will toil in the future also. We've got a lovely bunch of younger kids coming into the church now, and it's lovely to see them, the empowered group. To that end, we want to upgrade this building. Simona has told you a little bit about that. Our elderly people have to do the walk of shame when they need to go to the loo. We would like a toilet in this part of the building. There are further times when we would like to be in touch with those who are here today, both to encourage you to pray for us, to perhaps seek to spread the news that we're a church on the move and would love to raise funds. We can't do anything until we raise funds. So if you haven't already, I don't understand these things called QR codes, but if you haven't done so already, then scan that on your phone, those of you who know what you're doing. Scan it on your phone and try and keep in touch. We'd love to keep in touch with you, with those of you who are from other places than this church. The church has a noble record. I'm repeating what I said, quoting from 100 years ago. It may be a curse if it's made the excuse for slackness today. It may be a blessing if it becomes an incentive and an inspiration to more consecrated service and greater faith. The minister in 1877, when the church went from 135 membership, within 3 years it was 450, within another 3 years it was 900. That minister used to say, apparently, to the younger people who were there on a Sunday evening, who'd been there for more than one Sunday evening in a row, you should be out there preaching. And that's where Mikey and Doug and Daniel have been so helpful to us. We need to get a passion for sharing the good news. And we need to involve most members of the church, those who are not able to go themselves, to pray for those who are able to go. We're a church on the move. We're a multicultural church. Sometimes we grate each other a bit, but we learn from those experiences. I'm not here to preach another sermon, but I'm here to be thankful. 1901, this was produced. I would have not known about Fred Shipway and his walk of faith had it not been for this maintained in our archive. Fred was a missionary sent out from the Sunday school here, and he committed to keeping in touch with the children. And so in the 2 years we've got, he wrote 20 of the 24 months of mission, of church magazines. He wrote every month, well, 20 of the 24 months, of stories of how he settled in China. Eventually he died. His wife was 4 months pregnant when he died. They were powerful stories, worth reading, worth learning from the stories of ordinary people impassioned, empowered, and ordinary people that we've got the stories of today. Worth reading, even though my English isn't that good, but it's worth the stories. So please, there's more books there. There's a little bit of food left at the back. Do chat to other people who are here. Sorry I get emotional at times, but thank you for coming.